I was dreaming I was in a field of daffodils when a high-pitched whine cut through the serenity of my deep sleep. I sat up in bed, shaken so suddenly from my dream that I could swear I still smelled the flowers and saw yellow sunlight receding from my eyes to reveal the dim glow of my television set. A strange series of blocks was dancing across the screen in varying colors, each one lighting up the room in sequence, and the shrill tone changing with each change of the blocks that appeared. The noise hurt my ears, and I covered them as I kicked the blankets from my legs and sat on the edge of my bed. My cat Peanut darted between my legs as my feet touched the ground, and she blew straight past me and climbed to the top of the curtains before hopping down again and sprinting back to the other side of the room. She stopped dead at the door and just stared at me, her eyes shining in the darkness. Yeah, I'll let you out in a minute, I said to her as I fumbled for the remote on my nightstand. I snatched it up and pressed the power button, but the TV didn't shut off, and the noise continued. I pressed it again. Still nothing. I pressed the volume button, mute, channel, but the TV stayed on, and the tone persisted. Fucking batteries. I threw the remote on the chair opposite my bed and stood on tired legs to stumble over and turn it off. I slid my hand around the edge of the TV, looking for the buttons, and when I felt the raised bump that I assumed was power, I pressed it. Nothing. The TV stayed on, and the noise persisted. Just underneath it, I could hear the cat yowling and clawing at the door. She would scratch a few times and then spin in a circle for a few seconds before yowling and scratching again. I was still fruitlessly pressing all the buttons I could find, but finally gave up to let the cat out. God damn it, Peanut, fine. I wobbled over to the door and opened it. The cat sprinted out like its tail was on fire. I didn't blame it. The noise was horrid, and it felt like holes were being drilled into my brain with every tone change. Red, purple, blue, red, green, purple, blue, red. Over and over again, the blocks repeated themselves. I pulled the desk it was sat on his side and fell to the ground looking for the plug. My hand slid through cobwebs, and it felt the old dust of a piece of furniture that hadn't been moved in years. My fingers finally hitting the plug. I gripped it and yanked it from the wall. The TV stayed on. The sound persisted. Green, purple, blue, red. Always the same sequence and same shift in tones. That's impossible. I stood up and stared at the screen, the plug of the television dangling from my fist. I got back down and behind the desk and pulled every plug from the wall just in case. But the outcome was the same. I was bewildered, annoyed, and starting to feel a little uncomfortable. Downstairs I could hear Peanuts sprinting back and forth and slamming into things. The sound was a bit painful and annoying for me, but it seemed to be agony for my poor cat. And as my brain started to shake away the sleep, I realized just how much nothing about what was happening made any sense at all. Suddenly, the noise stopped, and the screen went dark. I stood in my underwear staring at the blank screen, trying to figure out what in the hell had just happened. In the silence, I noticed that Peanut had stopped trying to break her record for most walls bounced off. I flopped down in my chair and felt the remote beneath my ass. I picked it up and tossed it across the room before resting my face in my hands with a sigh. Just when I decided whatever the hell had just happened was over and I could try to sort it out in my head, the sound of static started to crackle through my television speakers. A voice broke through the static. It sounded like a woman, but was extremely distorted. Like a bad radio signal.
Unlock sequence terminated. Stand by for first test. Green test commencing in 10, 9, 8, 7, 6.
I stood up, my eyes transfixed on the television. It felt like the world around me was pulsing and shimmering. It was like staring through a heat mirage.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Green test activated.
Everything went dead silent again. And suddenly, my screen turned a brilliant green that seemed to wash my room in the same color light. My stomach seemed to be doing somersaults, and I gripped at my midsection and held back from throwing up. I suddenly felt delirious and dizzy, and just underneath all of that, there was another feeling. One much like falling. I fell to the floor of my room and lay on the carpet, praying whatever was happening would pass. Peanut trotted back into the room and over to where I was laying. She stared at me with big yellow eyes and pawed at my face. I gritted my teeth and curled myself into a ball, the pain in my stomach and disorientation getting worse. Suddenly, the tone that played with green during the sequence of colored blocks began to emanate from my television speakers once again. Peanut suddenly flipped out and unintentionally dug her claw across my cheek before once again sprinting from the room. The air started to shimmer once more. It seemed as if my sight was wobbling, but it may have also been the world. That's when they started to appear, like ghosts phasing in from beyond. They had bodies almost like slugs, except they were the size of my forearms. Their heads, or at least what I assumed were their heads, had the shape of unbloomed flowers, each segment lined with barbs. They were crawling over everything. The walls, the ceiling, my bed, my dresser, the door. One of the things crawled towards me slowly from under the bed. I inched away as best I could, but my back quickly met the chair. Somewhere downstairs, I heard Peanut yowl and fight against something. I tried to force myself to my feet, but the slug creature bloomed its face to me with a hiss, and I froze. The segments peeled back from something that looked almost like a monkey skull, except with 4 disjointed black bug eyes wobbling around in its sockets. Its jaw dropped open to reveal an extra circle pattern of tiny, sharp teeth at the back of its throat, and emerging from its esophagus was some kind of barbed proboscis. I suddenly heard the distorted voice of the woman cut through the horrid tone that still filled my ears.
Green test complete. In 10, 9.
The slug thing extended its proboscis towards me. It moved like a snake slithering across the ground and rising up in a bend when it got close. The skull slid forward a bit and the segments began to shake. My mind was briefly reminded of the daffodils from my dream. The proboscis darted forward, and I was able to raise my arm in time to stop it from stabbing me through my cheek. I shrieked and immediately attempted to rip it from my arm. The barbs hooked my skin and were pulling on it, and it was so painful that I couldn't help but scream. I saw something start to pump up the tube towards my arm. It was trying to inject something into me. I ignored the pain and tore the hooked barb free from my skin. A huge chunk of flesh came with it, and I felt a warm splash of blood run down my arm.
6, 5, 4.
I pulled the chair from behind me and tipped it over in the direction of the slug thing as it was reeling in its injector. 2 more had moved closer to it and also bloomed into terrifying skull-faced monsters. Their injectors shot out and struck the chair as I kicked it forward in their direction and tried to get to my feet. I heard the sound of wet flesh peeling above my head and saw another one blooming from the wall above me. I raised my hands to block the next hook fired in my direction.
2, 1. Green test complete.
The tone stopped. The wash of green light vanished from the room, and most importantly, the slugs vanished. I lowered my hands and looked cautiously around the suddenly dark and empty room. The TV had fallen dark and quiet once again, and I could hear nothing except the thumping of my heart in my chest. I became suddenly aware of the pain in my arm and grabbed a t-shirt from my dresser to wrap it in, my eyes still constantly scanning for the slugs, thinking they may reappear. After a few minutes of quiet, I decided I need to check the rest of the house and find Peanut. My heart sunk, thinking one of those things might have gotten to her. I wandered the house, turning on all the lights. No sign of slugs and no sign of Peanut. I had nearly given up hope by the time I got to the kitchen and heard her familiar mew come from the top of the fridge. She stepped forward and looked down at me with huge eyes that seemed to reflect my own thoughts. What the fuck was that?
Purple test commencing in 10, 9, 8.
The static voice suddenly blurted from upstairs. When my brain registered what I was hearing, my feet moved me without much thought. I sprinted back through the house and up the stairs like my life depended on it.
7, 6, 5, 4, 3.
The countdown had nearly finished by the time I reached my bedroom door. I turned hard and tripped on my own rug, falling right on my open wound. I felt the pain shoot up my shoulder and I growled through my teeth.
2, 1. Purple test activated.
The TV came alive in a vibrant purple, and I felt my pain wash over with a feeling similar to being doped on opiate painkillers. My body felt heavy. My chest felt warm. My head felt like I was swimming. I did my best to get to my feet. I had to get to my feet before the tone started. I steadied myself on the bed and pushed my way onto my shaky legs. I could feel the blood from my arm running down over my shirt and boxers as I stumbled towards the TV. I felt weak but managed to grip either side of the television, despite my palms being slick with blood. Before I could lift it over my head, the tone started. No slugs appeared this time. Instead, the whole house seemed to shake, and it sounded like something the size of an elephant was slamming into the back wall. The whole world wobbled and shimmered like the last time, but whatever had appeared wasn't in my line of sight. I heard the sound of breaking windows and splintering doors from downstairs as well, and shrieks that rivaled the sound of the tone itself. I used all the strength I had left to lift the damn television above my head and brought it down with the center of the screen on the edge of the hardwood desk. The room was still purple, and the tone continued. I could hear something knocking the pictures off my wall as it made its way up my stairs. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw shadows. I brought the TV down again and again and again until it was nearly broken into two pieces and collapsed on the floor covered in broken glass and plastic with the shattered remains on my lap. The tone had stopped. The purple tone was gone, and I never saw what it had conjured into my world. When I was finally able to get to my feet, I walked back down the stairs and looked for Peanut, but she was nowhere to be found. The windows were broken, and so was the back door, though. I can only hope she got out of the house and ran. It's been 2 days. I threw away all the other televisions in the house, and I'm thinking of getting rid of every screen from my computer to my phone, as they all cause me anxiety. The wound on my arm stopped hurting and started to throb with heat, and I think I'm going to need to go to the hospital for it because I'm not sure if the feeling of things moving inside of me is paranoia or real. Sometimes I hear the green tone, but that might also be in my head. I haven't really been sleeping much. I left some food up for Peanut. I really hope she comes back. If you made it this far, I hope you'll follow me on Twitter at KingSpook Creepy.